So this morning I'm talking to Carina White, who is a sports marketing expert with experience in athlete management and brand management. And Carina is especially committed and an advocate of inclusivity and diversity in the sports marketing sector specifically. So we're going to share questions today. We've got about 10 questions and we're going to bat them back and forth between Carina and myself. So I'm going to go first, and it's going to be interesting for all of you viewers and listeners to see how Carina and I answer our questions. We have not practiced this beforehand, so we have not rehearsed, so you're getting everything sort of straight off the cuff from both of us. And again, viewers will know that Carina and I both have quite robust opinions about certain things around diversity and inclusion in the sports marketing sector. So first question, Carina. Why do you think it's taken so long to get change for more Black talent to come into the sports marketing sector as a profession?
I don't think it's just exclusive to sports marketing. I think it's in all industries, really. I think specifically within sports marketing, it's always been a very white, male-dominated industry. And I think for them, it's never been at the top of their agenda or the top of their priorities to, really look at the diversity and say, hold on a minute, is this really diverse? Are we really, recruiting diverse candidates into the industry? Or are we actually, serving a diverse demographic or audience? I think now they are realizing the pros of having diverse staff, but also having diverse marketing. So let's hope it does change, but for the time being, we just have to keep campaigning for change and more representation and diversity within the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's you, Amanda. What do you think is happening at entry level in sports marketing?
So I think that the sector has to work a lot harder to attract Black, Asian, minority ethnic talent into the sector. I don't think it's a career of choice for people from diverse communities. I don't think a lot of people know about sports marketing generally as a career. Most people who come into sports marketing actually fall into it. They hear about it through a network, they hear about it through friends of friends, they might try another profession first, realize it's not for them, they want to do something they absolutely are passionate about. And when someone will say, well, why don't you work in sport or entertainment, they'll go, well, what kind of jobs exist in sport and entertainment beyond being, a player or an artist? And that's when suddenly the kind of scales fall off the eyes and people realize that there are roles inside the business of sport, and particularly in sports marketing. And it's quite a low barrier to entry. I mean, you don't need to have a professional qualification to get into sports marketing or sports events or sports PR or even the sponsorship side specifically. But I think the sector, you talked about the sector not kind of even realizing that it is rather homogenous, white, middle class, often Russell Group university. And it is recognizing that it needs to become much more diverse, but we have to work very hard at entry level to encourage more diversity to come into the sector. And that means the industry working to actually get the message out there that the sports marketing sector is sort of open for business and open for jobs. I think there's another piece at the moment with COVID that is alarming, because I think a lot of organisations aren't recruiting this year at entry level. So I think all sports organisations need to really use the government's Kickstarter scheme where they get part of the salary paid, because even if we offer 6 months paid placement and organisations top it up to, an £18,000-20,000 salary, because let's face it, we can't survive off any less than that. The government's programme pays sort of half of that for the first 6 months. But we will potentially be facing a lost generation of young people into the sector anyway, but specifically from a more diverse background. So I think this year, 2020, 2021, we have to really work together collectively as a sector to ensure that we are working even harder to attract people from more diverse backgrounds into the sector.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, okay. So I'm interested, we've talked about sort of entry level, but what's sort of happening beyond that? Because people talk about an attrition rate and people leaving the sports marketing sector after 4 or 5 years. Is that what you see? And what do you think we can do about it, and why?
I mean, when I first came into the industry, I was really lucky because I worked for a black sports management company. So my boss was black, the next person down from him was black, and so I felt very comfortable in the organisation that I was working for. When I left there and I went to work for a football club, that's when I really understood what it was like to work in the sports marketing industry, and I absolutely hated it. And I ended up leaving, and a lot of that was down to overt and covert racism, various microaggressions, comments that would be made to myself and myself only, being the only black person on the team, and then having to contend with a double whammy of the fact that I'm also female in a very male-dominated industry. So you then had, you know, the sexism as well, and I absolutely hated it. I felt very uncomfortable. There was nobody that I could go and speak to about my experiences. I didn't feel listened to. So it was like, I'm not going to sit and continue with this. So I left sports specifically and went and worked in a media agency. And, you know, returning back into sports, actually for me, you know, I returned back and I was working in an all-female agency. So I was like, brilliant, that's great. I don't have to contend with the sexism. The industry was getting a little bit more diverse. And also as well, I'd grown into my own. So I'd become more outspoken, more empowered to be able to speak up about things. So I felt that actually I can exist within this, this industry. And if there's something that I'm not happy about, like diversity, I need to use my voice and speak up about that. And that's why, you know, I've joined various boards. I speak out a lot about diversity. I try and hold organizations to account to improve their representation and their diversity, brands alike. And, you know, I think for me, it's really important because I know how I felt. As soon as I left out of my comfort zone of being within a black sports organization and going into the real world of sports, I ended up leaving because it was one of the most uncomfortable and awful experiences I've ever, you know, had to contend with. And I think for me, if there was more, I think we need to have more of myself, more of, you know, senior executives that are allies or that look like me, sound like me, come from similar backgrounds as me, really being embedded in that industry to support the entry level candidates, to support, you know, the junior level staff that are in organizations in the industry, to be able to say, look, it's not going to be like that forever, because we're here working to try and change this culture and to change, you know, so microaggressions aren't occurring anymore and you don't feel sidelined and you don't feel like the only person within the industry. There's a lot of times that I speak out about things, and I know other people speak out about things, and they're scared that, you know, they'll be blacklisted, or, you know, companies won't want to work with them, or brands won't want to work with them. And it's got to the point that I'm just like, I don't care anymore, because as a mum, I can't allow this to continue, because there's another generation of kids that are coming through, and I don't want them to have to experience the exact same things that I've experienced.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So why do you think, Amanda, that there's not that many black professionals, or why do you think more black professionals don't come into the sports marketing sector?
Well, I think your point that you made a minute ago is absolutely bang on, and that is that they just do not see people that look like themselves, sound like themselves, come from similar backgrounds, even in the middle of the industry. Up until quite recently, we've now got, as you said, we've got a raft of people that are coming through the sector. But I think one of the first things that youngsters do is they will go straight onto a company or organization's website. You know, these are, you know, kids that have grown up. You know, they're all over social media the whole time, and they will go and look at a company, and they will go look at the board, and they will go and look at the staff. Most organizations have pictures of their staff all over the website, and you can tell very quickly whether, well, you get an insight into what the company actually looks like, the basis of the business. And if they don't see people that look like them, other than at very junior level, they might think, well, this isn't probably the right organization for me to go to, because I might not get on. There's a reason why there aren't more people that look like me at the top. So they could even have checked out of even looking at the sector or looking at the organization right at the very first stage. So I think the more advocates we have for the profession that are from minority backgrounds that are in the sector, that are championing new faces coming in. I think there's a mentoring thing, and I think there's a sponsor thing as well. It's really important that we're sponsoring and mentoring young people as they come through the sector. I mean, through BAME 2020, we have an ambassador network and an advisor network, and we've now got ambassadors that are 4 to 8 years into their careers, and they are now mentoring and sponsoring younger talent coming into the sector, and I think that makes a massive difference. So and I've got a couple of ambassadors that have got white mentors and they've got black mentors, and they have one inside their company and one outside their company, so they're always getting two perspectives that might be slightly different perspectives, but they're getting two perspectives. They've got two people that can support them when they might be going through, you know, a challenging time. But I think we need to have more, I don't like this word, champions, advocates of young people coming into the sector, and until we can get that, I think, you know, people are checking out of the profession possibly before they've even given it a chance.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm in recruitment, as you know, Carina, and one of the things I hear a lot of our clients say before we go in to see them, and they ask us about diversity inclusion, and they will say to us, oh, but nobody from a minority background ever applies to our jobs. We advertise our jobs, we put them into all the right places, but we never get any applications. So basically, those people aren't out there. And then they kind of shrug their shoulders as to say, kind of, you know, how can you help us? I mean, what would you say to an organisation that said that to you?
They really wanted to attract diverse talent, they would look at where they're actually advertising jobs. You know, I can only speak for the Black community because that's my experience, and I can only speak for my experience as well. But, you know, I don't go on to Guardian Jobs to look for jobs. I don't go on to, I don't know, Monster Jobs or wherever to look for jobs. There are specific Black platforms, recruitment platforms, that a lot of Black candidates use, and companies aren't using them. And so if you're not using them, then you're not tapping into the Black talent. Before they had those platforms, a lot of jobs would be word of mouth. Oh, I know somebody that, you know, works at this organization and they said that this job is going, this would be brilliant for you. That is normally how, you know, Black candidates tap into jobs, is word of mouth, or, you know, specific Black owned platforms or Black media platforms. And it's like, why aren't you using these platforms to, you know, circulate jobs? Why are you not tapping into platforms that have Black audiences to, you know, for them to circulate job boards or whatnot? And I think that is a real big issue, and it's something that I know many people have flagged within the industry and said, you know, you really need to look at where you're advertising jobs. But then they go for convenience, they go for what they know, and so because of that, they get the same sort of candidates over and over again.
So where would you suggest they advertise? What job boards? What are you suggesting?
So Social Fixed is an amazing creative recruitment platform. So they tend to advertise jobs within creative entertainment industries, so sports, music, media, industries like that. There's also BYP app, which used to be called the Black Young Professionals Network, but they've now just put it to BYP. But they recruit jobs for all different sectors on there, and you know, they have a massive influx of Black candidates that access their apps to look for jobs. You have networks like, you know, I do the Dope Black Mums podcast. We have 2 WhatsApp groups with over 400 women in both of those WhatsApp groups. Dope Black Dads have one. Dope Black Women have one. We have over 16k followers on our Instagram page between each group. So that's nearly, you know, you're tapping into nearly an audience of, say, like 50,000 people who may not all be Black, but actually the majority of them are, and our analytics tell us so. So it's like, why are you not tapping into these platforms? You know, the Voice newspaper is one of the leading Black newspapers in the UK, always has been. They have an online version. They also have an actual print newspaper. Why are jobs not being advertised digitally on their website, or, you know, through, there's another platform called Black Magic Network, I think. and they run the Black Magic Awards. Again, they have a job page on their website as well. I would love to see all of these amazing jobs that are up for recruitment being recruited via these platforms, so that you can actually really get a diverse range of talent applying for these jobs. So I do think HR departments and stuff, they need to just work in conjunction with these platforms and with their existing platforms that they use. I know, like with you, Amanda, F1 Recruitment have a really diverse talent of pool of talent of candidates. So, you know, more of the companies and organizations need to be looking and really assessing, where are they advertising, what sort of candidates are they getting through from these recruitment companies or job boards, and really look at, are they worth the money that they're paying them?
Yeah, and just on the subject of, I know you're meant to be asking me the next question, but on the subject of recruitment companies, does the Black community, what do they actually really think about recruitment companies? Because I've heard, and you know, be bold, because I've heard lots of different things, but about, you know, what about recruitment companies? I mean, why aren't they used more?
So I have a love-hate relationship with recruitment companies, and it's for myself, it's always been, what is their actual motive? Do they want me as a candidate, or are they or do they need that one diverse candidate to send to their client? So I'm always very wary of recruitment companies, because it's like, have you actually looked at my CV? Do you actually know what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what job role I would do well in, whether I'm a good fit for a company, like you would with any other candidate? But it seems that with the Black candidates or the diverse candidates, they need to put diverse candidates through, because the client might have said, you know, we want a diverse range of candidates. So it might be that I'm not even qualified for that role, or I might not even be the best candidate for that role, but they're going to push me through because they need to show that they've got diverse talent. So yeah, in my history, I don't know if it's specifically because I'm a Black candidate or not, but sometimes it does very, very much feel like we don't actually care whether this job is for you or whether you're going to be happy in it. We just need to push you through to get somebody in that job to fill that role. So I can understand the hesitations with some people, whether that's down to specifically to do with race or not. But myself personally, I do have a very love-hate relationship with recruitment agencies, but I do love F1. I do love F1.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the other interesting thing that you'll be surprised to hear is that when, as recruitment companies, we pitch to go on to preferred partnership recruitment lists with companies, we are I could say we're asked very, very rarely to evidence and measure the diversity of our candidate portfolio, which I think is shocking, because there's no push from companies for us to evidence any diversity at all. And I think surely if an organisation is recruiting through a third party, that should be one of the very first questions that they ask, because if the recruitment company is really committed to diversity inclusion, they will be doing all the things that you've just been talking about, and then the people that they're talking to about roles won't feel as though they're the token Black Asian person that the recruitment company is speaking to. And I think that my sector has got to really get its act together actually as well, and start to work much harder to reaching out into diverse communities. Okay, I think we've probably covered the next question, but why don't you ask me the one about who's at the top of the sector?
So I know we've spoken a lot about kind of entry level and the issues,
Yes.
with entry junior level stuff, but sports marketing is still quite white, middle class and male at the top jobs. So why do you think that is?
Okay, in all honesty, I don't think there's any pressure on the white corporate middle class male privileged senior board level. I don't think up until recently there's been really any pressure or appetite for change, if I'm honest. I think that it's a nice conversation to have whenever I'm talking to senior people that are recruiting in the sports marketing sector. That doesn't matter whether it's governing bodies, whether it's agencies, whether it's media owners or rights holders or brands. It's a nice to have conversation. It is not a prerequisite. It is not the opening line in the recruitment need is not, we have a problem here. Our sport is diverse. The people, the players, the athletes, the talent are diverse. And as an organisation, the business or the representation behind the sport is not representative of what goes on the pitch. That is not the first conversation that happens. And actually, it really should be. And then that generates the next question, which is clearly we've looked at our organisation. We've specifically looked at our marketing, our commercial team, our comms team, our social media, our events, our partnerships, our hospitality. I could go on. And we are predominantly white middle class, pretty much all the way through, with a scattering, maybe 5% of BME people that are not in our finance team or our IT team. And we need to do something about that because we need to be much more representative. So that should be the first bit of the conversation, that we need to diversify our talent. And then the next bit of the conversation should be, how are you going to help us do that? How can we work in partnership together so that in 5 years' time, we've got more like 20% from a Black, Asian, minority background, ethnic background in our organisation. And because those conversations aren't happening, of course, there's no real agenda for change, and no one's measuring anything anyway. So if you can't change, I think, what you can't measure. So you've got this generational thing where the people that keep getting through to the top are white, middle class, largely men. And I think that until the white middle class Russell Group educated professional man turns around and goes, this has got to change, collectively they can make the change, but they do need to recognize that it's not going to change unless they get behind diversity and inclusion programs. And please don't just hire a Black person to be the head of diversity and inclusion, because that leaves them all on their own, and then it's their job to change things. It's not their job to change things. It's the white middle class, and I'll put females in there as well, to actually make the change themselves. So I would like all of my, all clients that I've worked with, I'm recommending that they really do read a book called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and I'm sure you know that book, and it's written by a white American lady who's a diversity and inclusion expert. She sees it through a white lens, of course she does, but it's fascinating to read that. And I think that until the very top in our sector can accept they have white privilege, can accept there is a whole sensitivity and fragility about being white and being in leadership roles, until they can understand who they are and the white privilege environment that they have grown up in, that's the starting point. And then I think so much falls into place after that, but we have a long way to go. I think we're tinkering around the edges at the moment. I don't think it's a have to have. I think it's a nice to have at the moment. And I think we've got a lot of work to do.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. We've talked a little bit about, microaggressive racism in the workplace. I mean, I hear it quite a lot from candidates, but I think as a white female, I'm an empathetic interviewer, but I don't think I think I literally scrape the top of the iceberg on being given some insight. Are you able to share any examples, not necessarily that you've experienced, but maybe people that you know have experienced of microaggression in the workplace?
Yeah, I think the most common experience that comes up is, people's names being mispronounced, and it's being mispronounced either on purpose or because they just can't be bothered to pronounce their name correctly or know how to pronounce their name. I've said this before in a panel, that if I ask someone, to pronounce Czechoslovakia, they can do that straight away with no hesitation. But if you ask them to pronounce a traditionally African name, there's a lot of hesitation or stuttering, or it's, I'll just call you Ola for short. And it's like, well, no, I don't want you to just call me Ola for short, because that's not my name. You're going to learn my name and you're going to pronounce it correctly. And until you do, I'm not going to answer you. You know, that seems to be a common microaggression that comes up. Or, you know, oh, where are you from? I'm from the UK. No, where are you really from? You know, where you're black, so where are you really from? And it's like, I was born in the UK. I'm British. I'm from the UK. If you mean where were my parents born, then I can say to you, my parents were born in the Caribbean. They're Jamaican. So, you know, there's a lot of questions that get asked that make you feel little, that are made to belittle you as a person, and are made to take away your power within the workplace or within society. And, you know, there's many microaggressions like that. Or it could be something simple like you might be overlooked for a job because they feel that because you are black, you're more lazy, or, you know, you have to prove yourself twice as much as a white candidate. And all of these things, you know, with microaggressions, people say, oh, it wasn't my intent to make you feel like that. And for me, it doesn't matter about what your intent was, it's how I actually felt, or how you actually made me feel. We can all intend to do something and that not happen. That doesn't matter. What matters for me is actually how that made me feel, how that made me feel, and what you achieved in exerting that microaggression on me or anyone else from a diverse background. And what that does is it makes us feel less than we are within a workplace environment or a workplace capacity. And microaggressions perpetuate and encourage status quos within an organization, and that is, you know, having those who have power, white privilege at the top, and those who don't feeling lower down the ladder of progression.
And what do you say to somebody if they say that exactly that? Well, it wasn't intended like that. Now I'm just basically not going to say anything because whatever I say is wrong. Because I hear that a lot from a lot of white people in quite senior roles that I genuinely think are trying to change, but it's almost like they fall at the first hurdle because it's too hard.
Yeah, it's laziness, Amanda. It's laziness, and again, it's white privilege. That, you know, if you don't feel like making an effort to do something, you're not going to do it, and you just won't say anything. For, you know, we're not afforded that ability to be able to have that mentality. If we don't feel like doing something, it means that we don't progress. If somebody in a senior leadership position feels like not doing something and they're white, it doesn't matter, because they're still going to be able to progress because they have that privilege of their skin color alone, even if they're mediocre at the job that they do. I think as senior leaders, regardless of whether you are white, regardless of whether you are black, regardless of whether you are Indian, you are a senior leader. So you have a responsibility to ensure that the organization that you're working in is operating from a equality level or from an inclusive level. So unfortunately, saying, oh, well, do you know what, I'm not going to say anything because I got it wrong. Unfortunately, you're a leader, so you don't have the option to do that. You have to lead by example. So if you got it wrong, reflect, look at what you got wrong, look at why you got it wrong, and make steps to educate yourself to do better in the first place. There's a lot of times we're going to fall at the first hurdle. Unfortunately, we don't all have that privilege to be able to just say, well, do you know what, I felt, so whatever, let's just not bother anymore. There's a wealth of books out there. There's a wealth of resources out there that people can consult with, or even consult with somebody in your organization or the person that you offended and say, look, that wasn't my intention. I get that it didn't, how I meant it to come across, it didn't deliver in that way. So what can I do? Or maybe not even asking, what can I do? Say, I'm going to go away and I'm going to try and educate myself as to why that was wrong and why the delivery didn't come off as the way it was. And then I can better myself to make sure that in the future, I don't perpetuate that microaggression again.
Yeah. That's great advice. Right. Final question.
Yes.
Pick one.
I'm going to go for... I'm going to go for, how can the white middle class majority that prevails within sports marketing industry behave in a more inclusive way?
Yeah, well, I think first of all they have to educate themselves, and I think and you're absolutely right. It is it's not good enough to say it's too difficult, it's too complicated. It's it's you've got to get your head around it, and you need to work hard, and you need to read, and you need to educate yourself, and you need to get immersed in it. The leaders need to really get immersed in this. If they are committed to seeing systemic change, they have got to accept responsibility that they are part of the problem and part of the structural problem as well. Because let's face it, the post-war Second World War career structure in this country is actually based around the male career. It's not even based around the female career that often has a lot of changes, and you have to duck and dive a bit, because women at the moment are the ones that are childbearing, have to take time out. So you've got a male corporate structure, and I think that suits the male. I mean, why would you change something that actually really works for you? So dismantling that system is difficult, because what you're actually doing is dismantling a system and a structure that benefits you.
Yeah.
So there's real danger in doing that. It's dangerous. Why would you do that? And I think that's when people are sort of half-hearted. Well, I'll let people in, but not too far in, And I hear people say to me things like, oh yeah, well, the problem is, and I heard it with the whole female argument as well. The trouble is when you promote people that are from a minority group, then, there's a potential that you're watering down the quality of that person. And I'm like, how many average white private school educated blokes do you know that are in jobs that should definitely not be in those jobs? There is mediocrity all around you. So don't play that one with me, because that is an absolute load of rubbish. So I think inclusivity starts with yourself. It then starts with, if you're going to set up a diversity and inclusion group inside your organization, for God's sake, sit in it yourself. If you're the leader, you need to be in it. Otherwise, you're on the fringe. You've got to be part of it. Your leadership team, fine, put them on unconscious bias training, because it's hygiene. It's not going to change anything. You can't measure anything as a result. You've got to. This is a long-term project inside an organization. You're not going to solve it overnight. But the first thing people have to do is the leaders and the leadership teams need to be better educated, better informed, and they need to know, as you said, they're not necessarily going to get it right the first time. That is not a reason to give up. You've got to be on a program of change and start to measure things. So, for example, we all know that if you have an inclusive culture inside your organization, everybody is more likely to stay. But if you're trying to welcome in groups, minority groups that are not or underrepresented in your organization, it is even more important that your organization is seen from within and without as being inclusive. How do you measure the inclusive culture of your organization? You have to find a way of measuring your inclusivity. Once you are on a journey to becoming inclusive, you are more likely to attract people to work for your organization if they're from more diverse backgrounds. Then you need to work with third-party recruiters. You need to educate your recruitment consultants internally to recruit in an inclusive way. We talked about advertising and where to advertise. You have to have an inclusive recruitment process. You then need to have a proper appraisal system. I mean, it's shocking in 2020 to hear some of the lack of robust appraisal systems, appraisals that actually happen. I spoke to someone the other day, 28-year-old, has never had a proper appraisal in 4 years of being with the company. It's like a quarter of an hour overview and then quick out for lunch. I thought that has disappeared years ago. Well, and I think specifically with the COVID year, how many people have had their appraisal cancelled because we've been working from home for the last 5 months? I mean, it's really important that self-development and career development carries on. And for your people that you are welcoming into your organization from a more diverse background, you need to be making sure they're still dancing with you. They're not, they're actually still with you, and communication is really important as well. So I think but it's, my fundamental message is it has to start at the top, and I think really leaders have been delegating. Diversity and inclusivity is being delegated down the organization, and it needs to be on the leadership agenda every single senior management board meeting. Inclusion needs to be on the agenda every single time. And I think therein lies another challenge, is that HR directors and recruitment directors often don't sit on the main board. So that would come under a finance director or a chief, a COO's role. But until it becomes a main board agenda item, a leadership item, we're not going to crack it.
I agree.